Hello, guys. How's it going? Today we're going to start the Neolithic Revolution. But before we do that, grades are getting ready to be put in for progress reports. I have all the zeros in the grade book, so you have until Sunday to make up any missing work. I will not be changing the grades, um, come Monday afternoon or Tuesday. So please take care of your business. All right, so Neolithic Revolution. First, you have to understand what a revolution is. Most of the time, we think revolutions are the violent overthrow of a political or religious kind of entity that has, for some reason, oppressed people for whatever reason. But revolutions do not have to be violent. This is one example where it's a nonviolent revolution. So the word revolution at its lowest form it just means to change from doing things one way to another way. It's like you change your mindset, you change your behavior, you change the way you do something. Okay. So that's what it's revolutionary. Okay. So today we're going to talk about the Neolithic Revolution. How, why, and when did agriculture first emerge? And what were its implications on human society? Agriculture was very important to the development of the human species and to the survival and continuation of our species. And it still is very important in our society today. So let's get started. All right, so before we actually get into that, let's look at this timeline. I was making this over the weekend, and my son loves this movie Ice Age, so he told me to put, Scrat in here, so I did. All right, so here's a timeline that I made. We got 2,000 years ago. That's around the time where we see that the human Homo sapiens sapiens, we pretty much hold our physiological form, right? We don't change very much physically in this 2,000 years. And then these blue kind of pieces here are the ice ages that people went through. Okay, this is the Pleistocene Ice Age here. So this is giving you a timeline. This is 100,000 years ago, 15,000 years ago. And down here is just telling you the period. So this yellow line is pretty much saying we were in the Paleolithic period, which is mostly hunting and gathering. By the end of the Paleolithic period, we see that the population is about 10 million people, which where we're at today, it's not a lot of people, but definitely the population is climbing. Okay. Under the Paleolithic, we see a fixed supply of food, hunting, fishing for animal protein, gathering fruits, nuts, leaves, flowers, mushrooms, insects to supplement the protein. Okay, and we've already talked a little bit about that. So here you get the green dash marks. This is when they start to transition between 10 and 15,000 years ago. We see a transition they start to do agriculture. They start learning how to do that. And it's not perfect at first. It's like they have to kind of figure things out, just like we have to figure new things out today. They also have to do this. Okay. Agricultural revolution is the same thing as the Neolithic Revolution. These two terms during this time, they're synonymous, meaning they refer to the same time period. Okay. So I know you're probably like, yeah, it's hard to do agriculture during an ice age because the weather it's not good, right? There's not the best kind of environment to be doing this. But then you're probably thinking, well, there's an orange dash here, right? So why not here? Why didn't they start agriculture here? Okay. Well, if we're going back to like physically how we developed, what some scientists and, archaeologists or anthropologists say is that our brains were not as developed, that maybe we just didn't have the cognitive, right, the brain power to actually kind of think about these things and kind of solve that particular problem at this time. Okay. So that's kind of one thing, is that we just weren't mentally developed enough to do that. Okay. So that's why we see it here, right? 10 to 15,000 years ago, we do see agriculture starting. The population right here, these red dashes, is about 250 million. So we have blown up, as they say, right, from 10 million to 250 million. But look at this, the last 2,000 years, right, of our population went to 7.8 billion. And a large part of that has to do with agriculture and getting good at growing things. And then, nowadays, we're able to make all kinds of stuff in the lab. If you go to HEB, you will see stuff like grapples. These are half grapes, half apples, um, or cherry plums. So in the lab, they're actually taking these genes and splicing them and fertilizing them and growing them, and it's creating new fruits and vegetables for us to have. Okay, and it all starts, 10 to 15,000 years ago with people starting this process. And just so you know, by 2023, the population should be about 8 billion or maybe a little bit over. So hopefully this kind of visually kind of puts things in perspective for you. All right, so what I want you to do now on your paper, you have to read this quote by Kathleen Kenyon. She's an archaeologist, back in the day. Very smart woman, wrote a lot of books, made a lot of observations within nature, particularly in parts of Africa. Okay, so here's the quote. For hundreds and thousands of years, man, and I mean biblical man, so men and women, had lived on wild foods as hunter-gatherers. The revolutionary step forward was the discovery that wild grains could be cultivated, meaning they could grow them, and made more productive, and wild animal herds and their products made constantly available. Okay, so this just means instead of like following all these wild animals, they started kind of trapping them and kind of putting them closer to their homes so that they can always have them nearby in case they need them, right? And this makes the products constantly available to people. With this discovery, the growth of fixed settlements became possible. So people are settling down. They're not really so much nomadic. They're starting to kind of settle down into communities. From this, all civilization is derived, right? All civilization starts here. So for the questions on your paper is, over time, there were changes in the lifestyle of man and in the space provided. Describe how life changed. You might say, we went from hunting and gathering to agriculture, or a blending of the two. You might say that they went from following animal herds to actually maintaining and taking care of their own herds of animals that were close by. So stuff like this. Or we go from roaming around all the time to these fixed settlements. Okay, so there's some options that you can put for number one. And for number two, what did all civilization derive from? Agriculture, right? The advent, or when they started doing agriculture, when they started growing their own food, that is when, at that moment, we can say that we've started to develop civilizations. So when, where, and how does this happen? It happens about 10 to 15,000 years ago. I've already said that. Okay. Humans began to mold nature to their needs, and agriculture emerged in multiple places. We're going to talk about the river valleys. We're going to see pockets of agriculture take root, but it's going to be near rivers, and it's going to be like all over. Somebody in Mesopotamia doesn't, go to South America and tell the indigenous Indians how to plant things. It's like it's coming up independently. So that means different places are kind of starting this process on their own, right? And as population grows in those communities, those empires or city-states spread out, we see like this an exchange of ideas, and people get better. And as they're planting and growing year after year, they refine those skills and they get very good at growing their own food. Okay. So this is also a part of the question, right? So this process is extremely slow. It's going to take thousands of years for people to kind of perfect this. And we're going to see innovation and technology within agriculture. Nowadays, we have all these machines and these fertilizers and all this other stuff, and we have scientists. But at the beginning, they don't have any of that. And so the process is very slow and it's very gradual. Okay. And so how does this happen? There's no TVs or iPhones. There's very little distractions. The only distraction you have is not being killed by, something in the environment. And so oftentimes, and these people had spent a lot of times walking around, they know their environment inside and out, and they just watch. They see, oh, hey, these berries, they're here every year at this time. What if, and what would they notice is when these seeds are dropping and they decompose, there's new bushes that start to grow, right? And so they're like, okay, so maybe we can take these seeds, right, and put them in the ground closer to my home, and then maybe they'll start growing. Okay, so it's observations like this. And another big part of this is trial and error. They messed up a lot. We always do. You mess up all the time when you're learning a new skill. And it's with that practice and keep going and trials that you actually overcome whatever it is you're trying to do and you figure it out. These people had to do the same thing. Okay, so it's a slow process, it's gradual. They make all these observations and trial and error. So some of the vocabulary, okay, and you have some in your Google Doc, right? So sedentary just means to settle down. Okay, it's the opposite of nomadic, right? They settle down, and when they start growing food, now it's baby making time, right? They have time to make babies. Husbandry, if you think of the word husband in the traditional sense, the husband, takes care of the wife and children and the family and whatnot. And so husbandry is the practice of taking care of those animals, I guess what you would call farm animals, right? Although they wouldn't call them farm animals, it's just the wild animals they're going to start to domesticate. This means to tame and to control wild plants and animals. When we domesticate corn, that means we put them in rows and we start growing corn. They're not just out in the wild growing. And those buffalo aren't roaming around doing whatever they want. We actually kind of fence them in and keep them close to our area. And domestication kind of goes hand in hand with pastoralism, right? Maintaining the pasture of animals. The other word is surplus. I put a plus sign here. This means when we have more food than we can eat. And remember, this is mostly we're going to see them consuming grains that they're growing. Okay, so, but a surplus is good, right? Having more food than you need, especially when you're just starting out during this time, is beneficial. So this video, I'm going to have to put in, I'm going to put it separately. And I said to start here, right? It's just going to give you some really good information that will help you later on answer the questions at the end, okay? And then I'll put this one in here too. This is about dogs, right? And animals, domesticated animals. Usually students like that. All right. So here's a big one. And those videos can kind of help you answer the question. But so what does agriculture lead to? How did the advent of agriculture change society? In other words, what are the implications of farming and starting to farm? Okay, so the next couple slides, this is what you're going to use to answer that question. First off, people become sedentary. They settle down usually near fresh water sources like rivers, okay, or lakes. Remember, growing crops or tending to animals take time. They need to stay put. They just can't disappear, and wander around for 6 days. They need to be taking care of the plants and animals that they have in their backyard. Secondly, they're now able to produce their own food. And when they do this, it leads to a surplus, right? That is, they have more food than they can eat. How does this play into? Remember, so the diet is when at first, they're still hunting and gathering and farming. There's kind of a blending, okay? But as they transition completely to mostly agriculture, we're going to see that they consume less protein and more grain. Now, more grain, they have a lot of it, but there's less nutritional value. But the upside is it's easy to preserve and store. Meat rots very quickly. And remember, they haven't learned to put salt on it and kind of make beef jerky, and there's no refrigeration. So we see they go from less protein to more grain. However, when the rough times hit, they have those food storages. They're able to kind of still weather, bad storms or cold fronts or droughts because they're kind of keeping and preserving and storing these grains. Right? Remember, more food availability equals more people. Right? Here's a way. Okay, and we get a lot of people. So we're going to see that the population doubles, triples, quadruples, and just continues on and on. Okay, there's still more, right? There's still more implications. Okay, so we're starting to settle down in our community near the rivers, right? We're starting to build our homes, and we're starting to have more children because now we're not worried about surviving so much because we have food that's available. So now we get one farmer in our community can feed everyone, if you think about it. Now, when this starts happening, this goes from everybody in the community looking for food to just one person and maybe a couple of hunters providing for everybody's food. This is the division of labor. Division of labor is dividing up the work. So we're going to have, our farmer, and we're going to have the people that go out and hunt. This means that everybody else in that community can find other jobs, right? They can do different types of work. So the dividing up of work leads to specialization. So here we're going to get people that make pottery, people that make the clothing, people that make weapons. We're going to get people that defend, right, the community. And we're going to get leaders, right, that rise up and kind of organize. And we're going to get religious leaders that kind of develop religions and the practicing and the morals and ethics of a community. So all this starts with having enough food. Why? Because people have a lot of free time now. You go from having no free time to a lot of free time. And when you have free time on your hands, one, you can baby make, right? When people get bored, they like to baby make. So there's that. And then so that helps with the population. Okay, so more kids are being born. It also gives people time to be more creative. So with creativity, we see, them developing, designs on their pottery and artwork and musical instruments and music and all this other kind of cultural stuff that makes their community theirs, right? And different from others. And we also get more time for increased technology. So as the tool makers, if that's their only job and they have all day to do that and they can think about that, they can make better tools, right? They can make, better pottery designs, design pottery that lasts longer and holds more or whatever it is. Okay, so this all starts with having enough food. Okay, without food, we don't get this. Okay, we don't get this at all. All right, so agriculture, the Neolithic Revolution is very important to human history. It is where all civilization has started from. Okay, so the exit ticket, and that's pretty much it for today, right? So the exit ticket I want you to think about was the Neolithic Revolution, was the agriculture revolution the worst mistake in human history, right? Or the most important event in history? And all you're having to do is you're going to pick a side and you're going to explain, okay? And I'll show you the Google Doc here in a second. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please hit me up in Google Classroom. Please make sure you're taking care of your work and catching up. I don't want anybody to fail this class because you're not doing the work. All right, so let me get out of here and let me show you the Google Classroom. So here, or not Google, the Google Doc. So here's Neolithic. Here's my Prezi clip here, link. So you can click on that and it'll actually view what I just showed you. Here's the quote, questions. I tell you slide 4 and 5. That's where you're going to get the answer to this question. And remember, the agricultural revolution is the Neolithic Revolution. Here's where you put your definition for the terms. Okay. And then slide 9 through 13, you answer that question. Okay. And then here's your exit ticket. Okay. And I have a sentence stem here. So what you can do is highlight or underline or delete, right? And then finish the sentence. Okay. And like I said, I will be putting those other 2 videos in there. So make sure you're checking it out. Thank you. Have a great weekend. Be safe.